Beef prices are spiking in the US and Australia after a cyber attack on the world's largest meat producer forced its operations in both countries to shut down. JBS blames Russian hackers for the weekend attack. While the Kremlin has pleaded ignorance, it's under increased pressure to crack down on cyber criminals operating out of the country. Mobin Nasir reports.
The world's largest meat producer is in a stew. A cyber attack on Brazil-based JBS has forced the closure of its US and Australian factories, driving up beef prices by more than 1%. A prolonged shutdown could disrupt food supplies in China, South Korea, Japan, and many other countries. It's the latest in a string of misfortunes for the multinational. Last year, JBS was criticized for risking workers' lives by not enforcing COVID-19 social distancing requirements. In 2019, it was fined nearly $130 million for bribing US officials. And last weekend, it became the latest company to fall victim to cybercrime. The company has announced operations are resuming, but hasn't said whether any ransom was paid to regain control of its systems.
Our systems are coming back online, and we are not sparing any resources to fight this threat.
No one has claimed responsibility, but JBS blames a group of Russian hackers named Ransom Evil or Revil. Cyber criminals from the country are believed to have carried out similar attacks on other large companies. In December 2020, IT infrastructure provider SolarWinds confirmed a cyber attack had compromised dozens of US government organizations, including the Treasury Department. 5 months later, Colonial Pipeline, the largest fuel logistics company in the US, was reportedly forced to pay $80 million in ransom to hackers after a cyber attack disrupted fuel supplies on the East Coast. And last week, software giant Microsoft warned criminals are targeting government agencies, think tanks, and non-profit organizations. US security officials believe all these attacks were executed by groups operating out of Russia. They say a holistic approach to counter such threats must include international diplomacy.
As we see criminal actors that are operating outside the United States, I think what the administration obviously is moving towards is how do we have a whole-of-government approach that brings together our levels of power that includes diplomacy and certainly our economic and, if necessary, and if authorized, outside the United States, what the Department of Defense might do.
Moscow has denied any knowledge of the cyber attack on JBS, but says it's cooperating with Washington. The issue is also slated for discussion when US President Joe Biden meets his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin on June the 16th. But security experts say tracking down hackers will require cooperation between several countries and international organizations. And until that happens, companies and government agencies could be easy meat for cyber criminals. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
And TRT World senior business producer Mobin Nasir joins us in the studio now for more on this. Hi Mobin, firstly, what's the latest? We know that this attack on JBS forced the company to close pretty much all of its operations in the US, Canada and Australia. Thousands of workers have been stood down in all of those countries. Is there any sign that they're going to come back online anytime soon?
So the company says that 9 of its plants in the US will become operational or will start resuming operations from Wednesdays. They still haven't said whether these are going to be at full capacity or not. There are independent media reports quoting workers and supervisors from different plants. For example, we know that in Green Bay, they are planning to start with a 4-hour delay. In Tasmania, in Australia, they will not be able to resume before Friday. So there is not a lot of clarity. It sort of brings you it seems to be very similar to that Colonial Pipeline hack, where it seemed that there wasn't too much information being given away, perhaps to not make people panic, but certainly it seems that these operations will take until the end of the week to sort of normalize.
And I do want to ask you more about that colonial attack in a moment. But as you mentioned, we're seeing the price of beef rising in the United States. We know that this could potentially hurt consumers and businesses alike. It's the summer season in the US right now, and many of these restaurants are only starting to reopen after lockdowns. This really could hurt the economy, couldn't
It's
it?
a real spanner in the works for many of these restaurants. But we're also seeing very sort of wide impact of this. So you saw livestock futures falling, beef, pork, chicken prices shooting up in different markets. And then, of course, some are more exposed than others. So, for instance, 31% of all supplies from this company go to China. Now, if you recall, a few months back, China had actually blocked or banned a number of Australian abattoirs from exporting to the mainland. JBS, of course, was not one of them. But now the mainland really doesn't have too many other alternative suppliers to fill in that gap. So really, we don't know much, but if these outages are prolonged or at least the capacity is not, they're not able to produce at the capacity that they were at, we could see this really having problems for the next few weeks.
And this latest attack on JBS comes just a few weeks after that Colonial pipeline attack that you mentioned. We know that crippled fuel supply on the east coast of the United States. We later learned that Colonial ended up paying millions of dollars in ransom to these hackers. Is this what's going to happen with JBS as well? Do you think they'll be forced to pay up some sort of a monetary figure?
Or perhaps they have already. It goes back to the same question, right? Was any ransom paid? If it wasn't, is the threat really over? Is the company still vulnerable? And then, of course, there's those question marks over how can these attacks be stopped in the future? That's still a huge question mark. We don't have any real international forum or framework for, taking down these kind of groups. It's really a lot of question marks hanging over this, and we're kind of almost expecting now which is going to be the next industry at threat.